Motor vehicle crashes are the leading cause of death for teenagers in the United States. 16 to 17-year-old drivers are almost twice as likely to die in a car crash than drivers who are just 2 years older. So why is the minimum driving age still 16 in 44 states? It's actually a highly contested subject. In 1903, Massachusetts and Missouri became the first states to require drivers to obtain a license. This was for two reasons. First, to generate revenue for the state government, and second, to hold drivers responsible for damages caused by their vehicles. As cars became more common, so did accidents. Therefore, states began to introduce formal requirements for a license. In 1909, Pennsylvania became the first state to establish an absolute minimum driving age, 18. 12 years later, Connecticut became the first state to implement a driving age of 16. But still, 16-year-old drivers had to be accompanied by a licensed adult. This was the nation's first attempt at executing a graduated licensing system that would grant young drivers more freedom over time. In 1925, New York followed in Connecticut's footsteps and created the learner's permit. 1 year later, a National Conference for Street Highway Safety drafted the Uniform Vehicle Code, which urged states to set the minimum driving age to 16. This wasn't an actual law, but more of a suggestion, and yet most states followed it. Between 1919 and 1937, 15 states enacted a minimum age requirement, 9 of which allowed drivers as young as 16 to obtain licenses. And by the 1940s, this number grew to include most states in the country. By 1996, all 50 states and the District of Columbia adopted graduated driver licensing policies. Even with measures like these, teen driving is still dangerous. Drivers under 20 account for 5.4% of all drivers, yet they also account for 8% of all fatal crashes. One of the more popular arguments for raising the minimum driving age has to do with maturity. This is Jay Geed. He led a study with the National Institute of Mental Health that focused on the evolution of children's brains as they mature from adolescence to adulthood. The team analyzed 4,000 brain scans from 2,000 volunteers and discovered this. Over time, the brain quickly turned blue in some areas and more slowly in other areas. The rate at which the areas turn blue represents their development over time, and one of the more significant areas to slowly turn blue was right here. The dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex. It's the part of the prefrontal cortex that controls impulsive behavior, weighs risks, and makes judgments. The research suggests that this crucial part of a teen's brain grows through adolescence and does not fully mature until 25. This means that teens' decisions are often driven by rash emotions and impulse, rather than by logic. This slow maturing process, coupled with rapidly changing hormones, can make a potent mix. As teenage bodies mature, the hormones encourage more novelty-seeking and risk-taking behaviors. Emotions start to run high, making it harder for them to think long-term and form wise judgments. Speeding, for example, was the root cause of over 19,000 teen crashes from 2000 to 2011. In 2016 alone, teen drivers accounted for 32% of all fatal speeding-related crashes. Studies have found that speeding behavior increases over time as teenagers gain more confidence in driving. Another argument for raising the driving age is that doing so could significantly reduce the cost that families have to pay for automotive insurance. The average 16-year-old driver in the US is expected to spend over $2,500 every year on insurance. Adding a driver to an existing insurance plan can bump up the price by an extra $600. Even 15 to 19-year-olds who maintain a clean driving record are expected to pay a higher insurance rate because they are 4 times more likely to be in a crash than older drivers with more experience. So people argue that since these hefty rates are highest for drivers 15 to 17 years old, raising the minimum driving age would allow families to avoid spending so much on insurance. Facts like these are pretty hard to ignore. Yet there are supportive reasons for keeping the driving age at 16. First, it comes down to the maturity versus experience dichotomy. This argument comes from the idea that skills can only be attained through practice and experience. So, raising the minimum age would only delay teens from gaining crucial driving experience. In turn, The argument hypothesizes that teenage crash rates would only shift more toward 18 and 19-year-olds. Supporters of maintaining the driving age at 16 say that rather than focusing on the driver's age, policies should concentrate primarily on offering more hands-on classes and tighter restrictions on novice drivers. Plus, raising the minimum driving age can limit the options teenagers have to participate in extracurricular activities. 57% of children ages 6 to 17 are part of an after-school activity like sports, clubs, or part-time jobs. And all of these activities require some form of transportation. Raising the driving age would take away the chance for these students to drive themselves and instead places the responsibility on parents who may not be readily available. This would also cause problems in areas where public transportation is limited. So the ultimate goal of this debate boils down to this: to keep young drivers safe. Both sides provide sound arguments, which can make it difficult to establish a single minimum driving age across all 50 states. But state governments have created programs like graduated driver licensing to help young novice drivers gain crucial experience on the road. Most graduated driver licensing programs, or GDL, consist of 3 stages that slowly phase beginners into full, unsupervised driving privileges. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released a study in 2006 that found that GDL programs can reduce fatal crashes for 16-year-old drivers by an average of 11%. New Jersey has long been used as a model for implementing strong GDL policies. The state established 17 as the minimum driving age and requires new drivers of all ages to follow its GDL policies. After the GDL program was implemented, the state saw a 25% decrease in fatal crashes of 17-year-olds, and nighttime crashes of 17-year-olds also decreased by 40%. So while teenagers across the country look forward to the day they get to receive this small 60 by 92 millimeter laminated card at the DMV, that day could come even later, but all in the name of safety. Do you think the minimum driving age should stay at 16? Leave a comment down below, hit that like button, and subscribe to our channel so you can be notified whenever we post new videos.